Jake, I want to bring in Carnegie Endowment for International Peace senior fellow and former Arab-Israeli negotiator with the State Department, Aaron David Miller. Because, Aaron, you know this issue better than any of us do, frankly. You've been on the front lines trying to negotiate between the Palestinians and the Israelis, trying to find peace, which has been so elusive. Can you talk to us about what might come next for the American-Israeli relationship, say, if it were a President Kamala Harris?
Right. But first, I have to say, Kitty, thanks for having me. Don't put me down in the shocked and surprised category or even the disappointed category with respect to what Benjamin Netanyahu had to say. This was predictable because the visit itself has nothing to do with substance. It has to do with our politics and his. And he walked into a situation which is fraught. He'll have a relationship with Joe Biden for the next 6 months because he needs the United States. He cannot afford, and I suspect in a minute I'll tell you why I think this may actually be running in a positive direction. He's going to try to get off on a reasonably good basis with a potentially putative American president, Kamala Harris. And perhaps the most important piece of his visit is the pilgrimage, the sort of Israeli Hajj, if you will, to Mar-a-Lago. Because it's quite clear, by one count, 100 of the 212 House Democrats were in attendance. 27 of the 51 senators were in attendance. What you've witnessed in this visit is not what it's going to achieve. It's what it reflects. And what it reflects is the fraying, I won't say the death of, because there will be a change of leadership in Israel, I suspect for the better. But what it reflects is a degree of stress and deterioration of the key adhesive, which has kept this relationship functional and quite extraordinary. And that is bipartisanship. You have a Republican Party that is now the Israel Can Do No Wrong Party. You have a Democratic Party that is deeply divided, not just between progressives who want to impose significant costs and consequences on the government of this government of Israel or its behavior, but mainstream Democrats, Senators Coons and Murphy and Van Hollen, who at various times in the last several months have basically called for conditioning U.S. military assistance to Israel. What is stunning to me is in the Democratic Party, there is now a full-fledged debate as to what constitutes being pro-Israel. And that is an extraordinary transformation, frankly, and I think in part a necessary one. But I think Mr. Netanyahu has contributed mightily, as have our own politicized, polarized politics to the deterioration of that bipartisanship. Whether it will endure under a President Harris, it's a very good question. I suspect that the inner Kamala would want to be much tougher, much harsher, much more sensitive and empathetic to the exponential rise of Palestinian deaths in Gaza as a consequence of Israel's efforts to prosecute a war started by Hamas terror surge, and I think more willing to understand that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not a conflict between good and evil. It is in the main a conflict between, it's Goethe's definition of a tragedy, competing justices, where Israelis and Palestinians have mutual needs and requirements if this conflict is ever going to be resolved, and if the U.S. is ever going to be an effective broker in this conflict. That is a point of departure. Both have mutual needs and requirements that have to be met.
That's such a good way to put it. We haven't spoken in a while. I wonder if you think that this conflict is any closer to coming to a close. I know the negotiations for a ceasefire and hostages have been intensifying recently. There's some anger, as Andrea reported, that Benjamin Netanyahu has put things on hold to come to the United States to meet with Congress, to meet with former President Trump, President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris. What's your sense of how things or where things currently stand?
Yeah, I think I've mentioned to you before that from my experience, and this is not an ordinary Middle East negotiation, since the principal Palestinian decision maker is ensconced 30, 40 meters below ground in a tunnel, probably below Khan Yunis or maybe even in Egypt, Yahya Sinwar. But these negotiations typically have two speeds, slow and slow. But I would say that there is a possibility in large part because of pressures that Hamas are under, and as a consequence of Israeli Defense Forces pressure for a deal in an effort to deal not with Gaza, but with the looming problem of what exists on the Israeli-Lebanese border, that it is possible to imagine. Knesset goes into recess July 28th, and it resumes shortly after the Jewish holidays, roughly 2 weeks before our election. Mr. Netanyahu's game is to survive in that recess. But in that recess, it's extremely difficult to bring down an Israeli government. And the influence of his two extremist ministers, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, would be neutralized during that period. I suspect, and again, I've been wrong about many things, that the chance of a deal in mid-August is really quite real. I do not believe that it's a deal that would go through 3 phases, but I think there's a reasonable chance that you could get through phase 1, a limited hostage exchange for Palestinian prisoners and a 6-week ceasefire. If you got that, it might well provide a point of departure on which the administration could actually build to bring about a cessation of the war. Whether or not that plays out the way I hope it plays out, I think it's a real possibility.
Aaron David Miller, really good to have you. Thank you, as always.